Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com. In this tutorial, we're going to create a simple database in MySQL Workbench. We'll add a table to the database, add some data to it, and then query the table. So my MySQL server is already running, as I can tell if I go to this little utility for stopping and starting it. So I'm going to go to MySQL Workbench and on the home screen here. So if you're not on the home screen already, but you probably are, you need to click this home button in the top left corner. Here's a connection I've already created. I'm just going to delete that for the moment so we can start from scratch. I'm going to click the plus button by MySQL Connections and we'll give this a name. So let's call it tutorial, or actually I'll just call it default because this is the only MySQL instance that I'm going to connect to with this workbench. So we've got the username in there. We've got an IP address here, which is the kind of local IP address of this particular machine. So this isn't on the internet. If it was on the internet, this database, my database server, this IP address will be different. And this is a port which we're going to connect on. It's the default for MySQL 3306. And again, if you are on the internet somewhere, you would use this information to connect to your database. But the defaults here, which were already filled in for me, apart from a connection name, they're good for connecting to my local server. So I'm going to click test connection. It says it's okay. So we'll click OK, and now I've got this icon here. So if your version of MySQL Workbench works a bit differently, don't worry about it. You just need to go through this sort of equivalent steps, whatever they are, on your version to get this working, and it will be something similar to this. Let's double click this connection now. So now it's opened a tab where I can write SQL commands. I'm going to start with show databases and I'm going to execute that. I could use the lightning strike button, but I'm going to use command and return, command and enter. And on Windows, I guess it would be control and enter, but that will execute the command if you've got the cursor on this line. So let's do that. So we can see these are the databases I've got at the moment, and I'm going to delete this command that I've just typed and add create database. Let's call it tutorial1 and execute that the same way. And then I can delete that and we can go back to show databases. Show databases. So now we see that we've got the tutorial1 database created, and we also see in the lower pane here, which is really important, that all the commands executed successfully. So if you type something incorrectly, then you'll see red error icons down here, but these are all green, showing me that all my commands are running. And it's really important to keep an eye on that pane down here. Let's make it a bit bigger to check that your SQL commands are running correctly. Now I can go ahead and create a table, but first I need to tell MySQL that I want to work with this particular database that I've just created. So I'm going to type use tutorial1, which is the name of my database, and execute that. And again, we see from the lower pane that it's executed successfully. So you'd normally have like one database per different application that you're going to use to connect to it. So if I have some application that I want to use a database, I want it to be a shared database that I'm going to put on the internet, for example, then I'd create a different database within the MySQL database server like this for every application. And then everyone using that application could connect to the same database. So we've created the database and we're using this database. Now I'm going to create a table. So I'll say create table. And let's give it a name. Let's call it users. And after another space, I'm going to put 2 round brackets. And in here, I need to specify what columns my table has. So I'll just give this one column to start with. I'm going to call the column username. It doesn't really matter whether you make this uppercase or lowercase. I prefer lowercase myself. In the early days of SQL, uppercase was more common. And we have to say what type this column is. So what type of thing does it store? I just want this to store text, and I don't know what the length of the text is going to be. So I'm going to just say text here. Text is a built-in MySQL type, So this is one of the types of things that you can store in a table column. Let's execute that. And again, we see the green icon at the bottom here showing me that my syntax was correct. Then let's type show tables and execute that. So now we can see in this sort of middle pane that it's showing me the results of that query, and it's saying we've got this table called users. So we've just got one table in our database called users. I can also, if I want to see more information about that table, because I've forgotten what's actually in it, I can type desk users and execute that. And then we see that we've got one column in there called username of type text. This also tells me that it's allowed to be null, so we could put like null empty values in there if we wanted. SQL, the syntax of SQL does vary a bit between different databases, and the commands that you use to switch to a database or view a table, these in particular tend to vary between databases. So desk users, this might be different in a different database, and also things like create database and show tables. But the SQL commands you use to create tables, they're fairly standard. But again, there's going to be minor differences between different types of database like Oracle or MySQL, and in particular the types that you can use, text or int for integers or whatever, they're going to differ a bit between different kinds of databases. So let's actually add some data to this table. So we know we've got one column called username. I'm going to type here insert into, and the name of the table, which is users. And we're going to put round brackets in there and specify the columns that we're inserting into. So we just want to insert into the username column. So I put that in the round brackets. Then after the brackets, I'm going to type values and another pair of round brackets. And in the second pair of round brackets, I can specify what values I want to insert. Well, I can only insert one value at a time here. So let's in double quotes. We use double quotes because this is a string. It's some actual text rather than being, say, a numerical value. So we put it in double quotes, and let's add in there a username like Bob, and I'm going to just execute that. Again, we see that it's executed successfully, and now, well, we could change this and add another value in there. So we'll have two rows of information in our table then. Let's change Bob to Vicky and execute that again. So now we've got two users in our database. And to see all the values in this table in our database, you can have multiple tables in a database, and you usually do, but we've just got this one. So I want to look at all the values in this table now that I've inserted into it. And to do that, I'm going to type select star, that's asterisk, from, and the table name, which is users. And if I execute that, we can now see here in the middle pane the values Bob and Vicky. So when you see all of this stuff, at first it seems really complicated, and some people have the tendency to make a lot of notes and really agonize over it intellectually. But the thing you have to do is just type these commands. Don't worry about the fact that you don't understand them fully at the moment, perhaps. Just type them out and get them working. Make sure you can actually type these and execute it. So have a go at this yourself. Create your own database, call it whatever you like. The database name and table names, they will probably have to not have spaces in them. In any case, it's good practice certainly not to put spaces in database or table names, but you can make it whatever name you like for your database or your tables in the database. So try creating a table, add some data to it, and select the data from it so you can actually see it. Follow through the steps that I've actually done here, because that's the really most effective way to learn. And in the next tutorial, we'll look at what else we can do. We'll look at doing some more complex inserts and selects probably. So until next time, happy coding.